What's up guys, in this video I'm going to show you how to use Yargs in your Node.js server-side applications. So I've got the basic environment setup running, which is just an index.js file in which I'm going to write my server-side code, and I've got the package.json in which I've got one dependency, that's Yargs. So I've got it installed already, but I'll still show you guys how to install Yargs. It's npm I save Yargs, that's it. Just hit enter and it's gonna get installed in your dependencies list. So what's Yargs? Let's Google it up. Yargs is an npm package which basically lets you pass on command line arguments when you run your server in the Node application. So you guys will get it as soon as I start typing the code. So I think we should get started. So first of all, I'm gonna do is I'm gonna import HTTP module, which is inbuilt in Node.js, that lets you create servers. So HTTP equals to require HTTP, and there's a method in HTTP that lets you create a server, which is const. I'll store my server in a server variable, which is http dot create server, which takes a function as a parameter with two arguments, which is a request and a response. And in the body of a request response function, the function that it takes as a parameter, we pass in all the things that we're going to do with the server. For example, we want to end the response with a simple message, hello world, and then we're going to listen onto a port, server.listen. We pass in the port, let's say 3000, and we pass in another param, which is a server listener function, in which we just log out server listening. Let's run this code and see if our server is running. So node index, yeah, server is listening. So let's go to localhost 3000, localhost 3000. Yeah, so we get the message as hello world. So but we need to do this thing using Yargs. That's the main goal of this video. So let's create a new file, a limit port.js. let's bring it to this side. Okay, so what I need to do is I want to write my node index file. That means I want to execute it with some params. So I'll pass in port flag equal to something, some value, and catch it here and run my server dynamically using the command line arguments. So in the port.js file, I'm gonna import something from Yargs, which is gonna be a require Yargs. Okay, so what I'm gonna import, it's argv. Okay, sorry, I'm used to React. I got a little mistake here. It's const, it's not import. So after this, I'm gonna have two conditions. The first condition will be if the user is gonna pass any port in the command line arguments, we're gonna use that port to run on the server. And the second condition will be if the user doesn't pass anything, we'll run the Node.js application on a default port. So I'm gonna define a default port here, default port, which will be equal to, let's say, 8000. All right, so let's create a function. Let's say const port equals to an arrow function, and in this function I'm gonna do two things. First of all, I'm gonna check if we have the port argument in the command line arguments array object. If it is, then we'll run the application on that port. If it doesn't have it, we'll choose the default port to run the application. So I'll say if argv, we are just imported here, argv dot has own property, let's say port. If it has port, then I'll return something here. I'll return an object containing some stuff, else I'll return an object containing some stuff. So what's gonna be that stuff that I'm gonna return here and here? We'll decide it later. But first I'm gonna export this port function, exports dot port equals to port. So it will be like importable in any file in which you're going to use it. So let's import the function here. Let's say const port equals require /port, and let's say we're not gonna do it like this. We are gonna do something like port dot the port function that I'm exporting here, port. I'm gonna run this and I'm gonna say console.log port dot port. Okay, so as I'm returning an object here, so there will be some properties that will be visible to the function here. So I'll return two things. I'll return a port, okay, and I'll return a message for the post server application function, sorry, listener. Okay, so here I'll print out the port on which I need to run this thing and the message onto the console. Okay, so now I'll say the port will be equal to the argument that has been passed to the argv that I'm importing up here. So let's say argv dot port, and I'll say a message like this: server running on http://localhost, and I'll inject the port dynamically into the template string, and I'll do the same here, but here the case is different. If we don't get a port as a default argument in the in here when we run the nodejs server, we'll run the application on a default port. So we'll say default port, and we'll say the same message here. Let's copy the message and paste it here: server running on localhost, but this time it's gonna be default port. Alright, so let's run this thing. Okay, so server.listen will take in the port, because the first argument to the listen function is the port on which we want to run this server. So it's gonna go to port.port, which is this function, and the port. This is gonna decide if we are passing any command line arguments from here. If it has a parameter with a name of port, it's gonna run the server on that port only, because argv is going to be an object. The object is going to contain all the properties that we're gonna pass from here. So if we're gonna pass port equals 3000, there's going to be an object in argv which will handle a name of port and the value of 3000. So it's gonna say server running on http localhost 3000. I'll say a colon here. I forgot to mention a colon. We need to have a colon here. Yeah. And if it's not gonna have any property, namely port, so that means if you're gonna not pass anything, we're just gonna say simply node index and press enter. It's gonna choose this part, the else part, which is gonna be a default port which will run on 8000. So it's gonna say server running on, let's say, default http localhost. Okay, and the message is going to be decided upon the condition that is going to be satisfied here. So let's run this application. First let's run it plain node index and see what it's going to be. Okay, so as expected, the behavior is it's going to run the application on default port, and we can simply press control and click. It will take us to the application, and yeah, we're seeing hello world. So let's make it more exciting. Let's include a template string here and pass in an h1 tag, and in here let's inject something. We're injecting this message here, this message. All right, so now we'll be able to see this message on the screen. Let's restart the server and go to localhost and refresh it. Okay, so we'll see server running on default because this time I haven't passed any command line arguments to the node index command. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass port flag. It's simply hyphen hyphen, or you can say minus minus port equals to, let's say, 4000, and say enter. So it's gonna say server running on http localhost 4000. It's not saying on default, it's saying on 4000. So we passed the port dynamically from the command line interface, and now if we're gonna reload at 8000, it's gonna throw up an error because the server is not running on 8000 this time, but it's running on 4000. So yeah, you get the message as the server is running on http localhost 4000. So this was all about Yargs. Yargs lets you pass in a default. Let me show you one more thing. Okay, I'll say, what if you guys wanna pass in something called name equals, let's say, Adam. Okay, so if I'm gonna save it, and I'm gonna console log it here, the argv object. Let's see where this name is in the object. Okay, yeah, so we have passed two things. We have passed in the port and we have passed in a name flag. So we have got the name. So if you want to access the name, you can simply say, as we have done this thing here, argv.port, which is 4000. So we can simply say argv dot name, and it's gonna print Adam to the screen like this. So you can pass in objects, arrays, ports, but the basic goal in this video was to show how to pass in dynamic port from the command line interface and not be dependent on the port that is already defined into the server-side code. So I think it's gonna be a wrap up for this video right now, because I think I covered the basics of Yargs and how to run the nodejs server-side application using dynamic ports passed in through the command line interface. So guys, thanks for watching the video. Hope you liked it. Bye.